Doug Christie is one of the few things that I'm confident in with the Sacramento Kings going into this next season. But that doesn't mean he doesn't have an extremely difficult job. On today's show, we'll talk about the hardest aspects of Doug's job, finding the balance on offense for everybody, getting the defense to take on a physical identity, and finding playing time for the young guys amongst this veteran heavy roster. It's all right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all offseason long. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And as some of you may know, those of you who are new, just get an understanding of how I feel about this team and the approach to the next season. I'm not feeling great about it. I know this roster has a tremendous amount of talent. This is one of the most talented rosters that the Sacramento Kings have had in the last 20 years for sure. But just because you have all this talent doesn't mean it all fits together. And that is essentially the crux of the problem, or the foundation of the most difficult thing that Doug Christie has to do with this group this season. It is find a way to put the pieces of the puzzle together that creates some sort of consistency, not just success, but consistency, while also establishing the culture and identity that the Kings and Scott Perry and Doug Christie and this new regime are trying to establish this season. That has become from what I understand, the primary goal of this organization this year. Sure, they'd love to win basketball games. Of course, they'd love to make the playoffs. But establishing a culture and an identity is priority number one. And Scott Perry is doing what he can to make changes to this roster. Of course, Dennis Schroeder's the biggest addition that he's made. He made some changes and some adjustments along the edges. Who knows? Maybe more changes could be coming. We're still waiting to find out if anything's going to come of this Jonathan Kuminga situation, although it sounds like it's not, and I'm pretty much okay with that at this point. But Scott has put this roster together or made the adjustments that he's capable of making in just one off season on the job. And then he's going to pass the torch over to Doug. And like I said in the intro, I have a tremendous amount of confidence in Doug. I'm not confident in this organization or much in this organization. I'm confident in Scott Perry and I'm confident in Doug. And I believe that Doug is capable of working together well with Perry to ultimately execute whatever plan that they have that they haven't really completely shared with us, and they shouldn't completely share with us. But I'm looking at next season in a vacuum of just next season, right? How do you get this group next season to succeed? And we're going to talk about the defense. We're going to talk about the playing time, but let's be honest, everybody. This roster is an offensive roster. This roster's strength has to be on the offensive end. And again, everything that Doug Christie, like the hardest part of Doug Christie's job is finding a way to put these pieces together. There is not a perfect fit with this puzzle. This puzzle is not, these pieces are not the same. A better analogy would be like they're a bunch of mismatched Lego blocks. And how can you find a way to put these Lego blocks together in a way that is consistent? Consistency has been a big issue with this team for a very long time. We know you have a ton of scorers on this roster, right? Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan still being on this team. He's a scoring first guard. Domantas Sabonis is capable of scoring and should be one of the leading scorers on the team, even though he doesn't have a scoring first identity or mindset. But how do you get all of these scores to succeed together? Now, that doesn't mean how do you get DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine and Domantas Sabonis to each score around 20 points per night while having Keon Ellis and Keegan Murray and Malik Monk shoot 38% from three-point range. Like, the expectation is not find a way to make sure all of these guys are eating at the same time. If that's the case, then the Kings are going to score 150, 160 points a night. That's not realistic. But how do you find a way to get everybody to succeed together and find a balance of how these different individual players want to play, right? You have DeMar DeRozan, who is an ISO specialist. You have other guys like Domantas Sabonis who want to move the basketball. You've got catch and shoot threats in Keegan and Keon. You have a pick and roll threat in Malik Monk. How do you find a way to balance ISO and team basketball and ball movement? Doug Christie has always talked about the ball having energy. And when the ball has energy, meaning it's moving quickly and it's touching a lot of hands and the ball movement is great and it's crisp and it leads to a good shot, that is what Doug Christie is all about on the offensive end. He calls it like beautiful. And that's the way that his Sacramento Kings played when he was a player in the early 2000s. That's great. But you have, again, a quote-unquote ball stopper who's unbelievable in the isolation in DeMar DeRozan. And last season, it felt like for the entire season, you had two offensive identities that did not mesh with each other. And when DeMar DeRozan was cooking in isolation, everybody else was just kind of standing around watching because there's nothing else that they could do. And then when the Kings were trying to move the basketball, DeMar DeRozan wasn't as much of an offensive threat as he should be. And I can even throw Zach LaVine into that mix as well. I don't think Zach LaVine is as ISO heavy of a scorer as DeMar DeRozan is. Excuse me. But he's going to be he's going to be another isolation threat, another guy with the ball in his hands a lot that's going to be taking a lot of shots. He's going to be shooting off the dribble just as much as he's going to be catch and shooting. So it's going to be, I don't know what the answer is. And these are things I'm sure Doug Christie and his coaching staff and Mike Woodson and all these guys are probably already working on and already brainstorming, and they'll get to work and really hit it hard when they get into actual training camp. But finding a way to balance these individual skill sets together into a team coherent offensive identity, because a team offensive identity is way better than the individual identities. Again, we know the strengths of these guys. We know how they want to play, but you need to find a way to balance them out with each other so that it doesn't feel like you're flipping a coin every time you're down the floor. Heads, we're playing a team half-court set where we're moving the basketball and pick and roll and blah, blah, blah. Tails, get the ball to DeMar DeRozan and let him cook. And I know Mike Brown's philosophy was, hey, try and move the ball around, and then if it got to within a certain point of the shot clock, like less than 10 seconds or 14 seconds or something like that, okay, now we go to DeMar when things break down. And maybe there's an element of that could work, but it obviously didn't, because either DeMar DeRozan had the ball in his hands for 16 to 20 seconds sometimes, or the Kings didn't get DeMar the ball until it was too late because they tried to create something as a team and it just wasn't there. Domantas Sabonis is still on this roster. And I know we have concerns with the Sabonis with being a top guy and the amount of money he's being paid and the fact that he is not a scoring big man for the amount of money that he's being paid. But Domantas Sabonis, second to Nikola Jokic, is the best passing big in the league. Likes to get his teammates involved, can find his open teammates. You can play through him. When the Kings were at their best, what were they doing? Playing through Domantas Sabonis in the DHO game. I think that can work. I don't know why we saw videos of DeMar DeRozan and Domantas Sabonis working together at USC last offseason, and then we never saw a two-man game between the two of them really at any point last season. Figure out a two-man game with them. Domantas Sabonis better have a two-man game with Zach LaVine. If not, what the heck are we doing? Doug Christie has to find a way to get these strengths to intermingle with each other. And role players need to be featured too. This is something that Mike Brown did not do a good job on. Every single year that Mike Brown was here, there was at least one guy on offense that just their job was just to stand in the corner and try not to become invisible. Floor spacing is important. And Keegan Murray is going to be out there to space the floor. And Keon Ellis is going to be out there to space the floor. Maybe Neek Clifford is going to be out there to space the floor. Like, floor spacing is absolutely important so you have room to work. And so DeMar has room to get to that spot in that mid-range isolation that he likes. Or Zach LaVine has room to get downhill. Spacing is good. But shoving someone in the corner like Keegan Murray, who's capable of being more of an offensive threat than that, it was kind of the Harrison Barnes treatment. You're just wasting that player. And the defenses know it too, because they have to respect it. So they have to hover and remain close, but they know more likely than not, the ball's not getting out there. And if Keegan's not getting consistent amount of looks offensively from 3-point range, how in the heck can we expect him to get that 3-point percentage back up into the high 30s, which is where we need it to be, where Keegan needs it to be. So finding a team offensive identity, finding consistency on the offensive end where everybody is featured, not just the top guys. In reality, right, like if we're talking about how do the Sacramento Kings be their best version of themselves next season, they have to be a really, really good offensive team, but it's not going to be the same as it was in Beam Team 1. That team was about pace and getting up and down the floor really quickly, and I do think the Kings should and can play fast, but when you have DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine on your roster, like, that's not going to be, and you no longer have De'Aaron Fox, one of the fastest, if not the fastest point guard in the league. Like, it's not going to be as strong as it was a couple of seasons ago. But what can be elite with this team, find a way to have one of the top, if not the top half-court offense in the league. When you get into the half court, you have enough sets, you are comfortable enough playing together, you have enough weapons to where it is tough for the defense to know how to stop you and what to take away. As constructed, this roster needs to be really, really, really good on the offensive end to have a chance at making the playoffs, and their half-court offense needs to be elite. That is what Doug Christie has to figure out. Scoring is your superpower. In the half court, you have to be dangerous. And then, of course, defensively, too, we can't just completely punt that side of the ball, but we also have to be realistic again with this roster of what to expect from the defense. We'll talk about that. Plus, playing the young guys versus playing the veterans. That's another problem for Doug Christie to figure out, and we're going to talk about it right here on Locked On Kings. Like I said at the top of the show, this episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by GameTime. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with the friends or the fam, and it's game day, and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands, right? It happens. That's exactly where GameTime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money that you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. GameTime makes it possible. GameTime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer that you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views that you can't beat anywhere else, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. GameTime is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for exciting upcoming MLB games. It's a great way for you to kill the time between now and the start of NBA season. Go to a ball game. Go out to Oracle Park in San Francisco to watch the Giants. We got the A's here in West Sacramento. Get your tickets with GameTime to either of those games or any ball game around the country. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the GameTime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Of course, the Sacramento Kings can't just ignore the defense. And Doug Christie, being the player that he was in the NBA, is, of course, very aware of the importance of the defensive side of the ball. Defense is one of the things that Scott Perry identified as a identity trait that he needed to establish and wants to establish with this team. It's all fine and dandy. But this roster, like it's been for years, is not loaded with defensive star power. Keegan Murray, Keon Ellis still on this roster. Best believe they're going to still be workhorses. I don't think Keegan is going to have to guard the fives at times like he had to do last season, but Keegan is still going to wear the primary defensive responsibility for anybody over 6'5". And anybody under it, Keegan might still guard them at times, but that'll be Keon Ellis's responsibility. And we hope, hey, Dennis Schroeder can play better defense. The Kings as a team can play, hopefully, some better defense. But again, looking at this roster and expecting Doug Christie, because Doug was a defensive player back in the day, to just suddenly be able to turn this roster into a defensive roster or a even average defensive team, it's a tough ask. But there are things on the defensive end that we can see and that Doug can do that might not necessarily produce the results that we all want. It won't necessarily make the Kings a top defensive team in the league, but it can start to build towards establishing that identity. The Kings defense can play physical. Now, it might get them into foul trouble on some nights or most nights. And if that's the case, then you ramp back the physicality a little bit. But I know Doug Christie is all about like making sure, for lack of a better term, and it's a pause moment, but it's what he says, like, make sure they feel you. Guys can feel you. Like, he wants the opposing team to know and to feel that Kings defenders are always there and always around them. I'm not expecting DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine and Domantas Sabonis to suddenly become really good defensive players. But I don't have to ask much of this from Sabonis because this is naturally who he is. Sabonis is physical as hell. So even if Sabonis isn't the greatest rim protector on the planet, he does have a pretty good defensive field goal percentage around the rim because of how physical he is. Like, Doug, if he can find a way to, on the defensive end of the floor, get this team to buy into a attitude and a physicality that's like, we're going to take pride in this. And yeah, we might foul out of games. And yeah, we might foul 3-point shooters, which was a big problem under Doug Christie last season. Remember the amount of times that the Kings gave up 3 or 4-point plays last season and fouled 3-point shooters last season? It's because they were trying to be aggressive on closeouts. That's great. Hopefully that's not a problem for 82 games. But I want to see this team bring a physicality to the defensive end from the jump this season. And again, if you have to tone it back because Keegan Murray and Keon Ellis and everybody's getting into foul trouble and it's costing you games, then you can make that adjustment. But I need to see physicality from this group. That is something, like, skill set wise, I know the Kings don't have the greatest of individual defenders. I know a lot of the defensive end of the floor too is heart and hustle and the willingness to do it. It's a great cliche for all of us to say while we're sitting on our couches, not actually having to go out there and do the work. Like, I understand if more offensively driven guys and guys that have high expectations on the offensive end, like LaVine and DeRozan, don't necessarily want to exert the energy on defense that is required to be a good defender. I'm realistic. I'm not expecting that to suddenly change. But you can get this team to take on an attitude of, like, we're going to play physical. We're going to be tough. You're going to know we're there. If you still score 120 points on us or get us into foul trouble, okay. But you're going to know we're there. That to me is the starting point. That to me is a achievable goal for this defense. Find a way, for the love of God, to break opposing teams' confidence shooting the basketball against you, especially in your own gym. It's been a problem for God knows how long. How many times do we see teams who are not good 3-point shooting teams come into Sacramento or play the Kings on the road and shoot 40+% from 3-point range and knock down 15 or more threes? How many times? Feels like it happens once a week, if not more, during the season. I feel that while defensively, the Kings still don't have a lot of guys, or any guys other than Keegan Murray, that's like 6'7", 6'8", 6'9", the Kings can, again, adopt this mindset of physicality and this they're going to feel us mentality and at the very least, try and throw off or impact the confidence of teams when they come into games against you, that they don't think or they don't know that they're going to have the green light and good looks from three all game long. Shooting is all about confidence. Every team shoots well against the Sacramento Kings, it feels like. Why? Because every team, regardless of how good or bad their shooters are, is confident against you because they know your identity on the defensive end of the floor is to allow a lot of good looks from three-point range. You can change that. You can impact that without a roster full of top-notch defenders in the league, which of course the Sacramento Kings do not have. The question is, can you get, and I don't mean to single these guys out like they're the problem, but can you get DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine to buy into that? Again, both those guys have a tremendous amount of responsibility on the offensive end. They're offensive specialists. They're superstars on the offensive end. Defensively, can you get them up to a level where they are not only willing to be held to the same standard with that physicality on the defensive end as the entire team, but they're leading by example with it? That's going to be a big question mark for me with this team on the defensive end. Finally, talking about Zach LaVine, talking about DeMar DeRozan, these veterans that while they're on the roster, you figure you're going to play them a lot, right? But you also have young guys. You got Nick Clifford. You got Maxime Reynaud on this roster that I think deserve playing time. And how do you find playing time for them consistently? And what happens if the season gets to a point where things aren't looking great and it might be time to prioritize the young guys? Is Doug capable of doing that? We'll talk about that in just a second. This episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is also brought to you by OpenPhone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time that you had an urgent need, maybe for like a plumber or a service provider. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait for them to call you back? No, probably not. You moved on, right? It's urgent. You need something. That's why you need OpenPhone. OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app on your phone or on your computer. OpenPhone lets you manage your business calls and texts from a single app. The shared inbox feature is a game changer. Your team can jump into conversations instantly without missing a beat, like they've been the ones talking to the client the entire time. And their AI agent handles after-hour calls, answers common questions, and captures leads, so you never miss a customer no matter where you're at or what time of day it is. OpenPhone is offering Locked On Kings listeners 20% off of your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That's OPENPHONE, openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers. The reality to start this season is that the Sacramento Kings are going to play their veterans heavy minutes, right? As much as people have talked about, hey, move DeMar DeRozan to the bench, it's not happening. I mean, unless Jonathan Kuminga is here, they would try it then. But I just don't think that's happening. Zach LaVine is not going to play less minutes so that Nick Clifford can get opportunity right out the gate. But if we get into February, we're getting around trade deadline time. And of course, at the trade deadline, Scott Perry might decide to go in a direction and maybe trades away DeMar, or I'd say Zach, but I don't know if anybody would take Zach's contract or Domas's. But let's say that it could be that Scott Perry makes the decision for Doug. Scott trades away some of his veterans, and now Doug is like, well, now I have the opportunity to play some of these young guys. But what happens if we get to a point this season where it's not going great? You're at best a bottom play-in team, like a 9th or 10th seed at best, but you really don't feel like you have much of a shot. Things aren't going well. Things just are, they're just as disjointed with this roster that does not mesh and does not fit together as last season. You tried some things, it didn't work. And to be honest with you, I think that scenario is the expectation at this point. And I don't think that's too overly negative or pessimistic to say. What we have seen from this roster is that it doesn't work. It's not very coherent. We saw that last season. So we're hopeful that Doug Christie can figure that out and change that by doing all the things that we talked about in the first 2 segments. But as of right now, what we've seen is that this team doesn't mesh together. So if that stays true and carries through the entire season or most of the season. What happens when we get to the final third of the year and it's time for the young guys to be prioritized? It's time for Neek Clifford to get consistent minutes. Now, I don't know if Neek would ever work his way into the starting lineup or anything like that, but do you sacrifice? Do you take away some of DeRozan or Levine's minutes to give to Neek Clifford? Maxime Reynaud, I already think should be part of the rotation with Neek Clifford right away because I don't care about Drew Eubanks. Like, sorry, Drew. I don't care about what Drew brings to the table, and I don't think it's that big of a deal. Like, play Maxime Reynaud right away, unless he's so bad that he's not ready. But if you get to the final third of the year where you really can play Maxime Reynaud, or, I don't know, give Keegan Murray more offensive responsibility the final third of the year. Have him be a priority on the offensive end. Draw things up for him. Get him more. I mean, they should be doing this anyway, but make him a guy at the end of the season if things aren't going well. Does Doug Christie have the confidence in himself, have the relationship? And this is the part of Doug I'm most confident in because Doug is phenomenal at building relationships and is so well respected. Does he have the ability to go to DeMar or to Zach or to any of these vets and go, look, you've been around the league a long time. Obviously, you know things aren't working out here. We're not winning. We're not where we want to be. We got to think years ahead here, even if that's, of course, a time when you're not around. And if you want out, of course, we can have that conversation this summer or have that conversation at the trade deadline to try and trade you away to a place where you can be more valuable and you can be playing for winning ways. But right now, with where this organization is going, I need to give Neek Clifford some burn. I need to give Maxime Reynaud some burn. I need to see what Keegan has on the offensive end before we make a decision about his contract extension. Does Doug have the ability and the confidence to go to those top guys? Again, he's got a Hall of Famer on his roster, a future guaranteed Hall of Famer in DeMar DeRozan. He's got a star offensive player. There's question marks about Zach and his ability to be an overall all-star or star-level basketball player. But on offense, Zach LaVine's absolutely a star. Does he have the confidence to go to those guys and go, look, we're not going to completely shut you guys down. I mean, maybe we will. But it's time for us to take away some of your minutes or kind of wean you off a little bit so that we can get these guys more playing time. And truth be told, both those guys, it might be to a point in the season where maybe they're banged up or anything. We're like, yep, we get it. All right, that's fine. Nothing really to play for. And I believe DeMar DeRozan, at least specifically, is enough of a veteran that he knows what's going on. And he's also going to be helping the young guys throughout the entire season. He's going to be a mentor to some of the young guys, a mentor to Neek Clifford. Hopefully we'll still keep working with Keegan Murray. Like all this isn't out of left field, but I'm very curious if the season gets to a crossroads, how Doug handles that crossroads. And if Doug and Scott and the Kings decide the future is the priority now. We gave it 40, 50 games with this group that we primarily inherited. It didn't really work again. Or some things worked, other things didn't. Now we're going to green light some of our young guys to really get some opportunity to learn and develop and grow. And if we lose a bunch of games, then I guess we get a better draft pick. If we start winning, then we found something that we're excited about. I'd like to believe that Doug, with the backing of his front office, because that's the thing, Mike Brown, Monty McNair, very clearly not on the same page for a lot of their time together with who they wanted to play, what kind of guys they wanted. I do have faith and confidence that Scott Perry and Doug Christie are and will remain on the same page. So if Doug decides, I want to play Neek Clifford, I want to play Maxime Reynaud, I want to bench this guy, that Perry will support that. And vice versa. If Perry goes to Doug and says, look, the season ain't working, let's see what we got in Keegan Murray before I pay him, that Doug will say, all right, I hear you, and then actually execute that and bring that to the floor. Hopefully we don't get to that point. Hopefully the Kings are good and a playoff team, and the young guys are still having some sort of impact in that. Like, I think Nick Clifford is going to be a rotational piece for the Kings right away. So hopefully everything is just sunshine and rainbows, but I'm realistic about what this roster is. And I'm very curious now that Doug is not coaching for his job, but he's now got the job, how he coaches, how he approaches it. It's one of the things I'm actually really excited about to see for this upcoming season. Now I want to hear from you. Your thoughts on all this stuff that we talked about, your confidence in Doug to handle these different things, how you would handle these different things. Hit me up. Let me know at Matt George Sack on Twitter. You can email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com, or leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Appreciate your support as always. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode of Locked On Kings. Until then, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.